Okay, hey everybody, Dan here, stockmarketmentor.com. Today, I want to look at Tesla. Now, earnings are not an issue. They don't report until February, so they already got that deal behind them. But what I want to do is just look at this, what looked like a pretty solid breakout. I already got it all marked up. Looked like a pretty darn solid breakout here above 450. You can see several days ago, I think it was early last week, Piper Sandler raised their price target to 500 bucks. Sure. I mean, I don't know who Piper Sandler is, and they don't really care whether I know. There's a lot of different analysts out there, a lot of different trade houses, and so they've got a $500 price target. And if I recall, it did run up on that news. So there is buying interest there. I've always thought it's interesting when somebody raises a price target, everybody rushes to buy the stock, and it's actually the same stock that it was yesterday. It's the same stock that it was last week. So why didn't you buy then? And it's because some third party, somebody that you don't even know, comes out and says, "Hey, I think the stock's going higher." So anyway, that's just my pet peeve about price targets. But with that said, I want to look at Tesla now and check out the action. Let me just get rid of this stuff. So this popped up today above 450, and actually not too long ago. I'm doing this with 12 minutes left to go in the day. And then it's come back. So what looked like, hey, maybe this is a good buy is turning out not to be so. It's not bad, but there's just no follow through on this. And what I want you to remember is that prior price action does mean things. And so you can look back here and see where the stock popped up to 470. Look at the volume, big volume over the last few days. So this stock has been really fallen since that high in just a very short number of days, 6 trading days. This was down over 12%, and it actually wasn't that long ago. This is why I'm laying this out, because there's still a lot of supply here. Remember that for every share that was sold, somebody bought it. And so you've got some upside down traders here, and they will be, and they are unloading their shares when they can kind of get their money back. This is one of the pockets of traders where you'd call weekend sellers, stuff like that. So I want to look though at the the intraday chart, and we'll see how this thing unfolded. Upper left here, I'll take it here for just a quick sec. Okay, that's the daily chart that we just looked at. It's just got some pivot points in there. But let's go to the hour chart, and you can see the zigzag, okay? 10-minute, 15-minute, 5 minutes. So let's start with the 5-minute here. Okay, the stock pops up this morning, trades above this orange line, which is the volume weighted average price. It's the line that marks at that given point in time, like right here at 11:05, the VWAP, volume weighted average price, is 445.55, meaning that if you take into account all the shares traded so far this day up until 5 minutes after 11, the average price of the shares transacted was 445.55. So we want to see the stock remain above that level, because that tells us that there's still buying pressure. They're still buying above. It's like a moving average, guys. It's like when a stock's trading above the 50-day moving average and it's in a trend and it's kind of pulling the moving average up with it, you know that buyers are in control. They keep grabbing the price. They keep grabbing the stock at a particular price, and it raises the average. So it's really nothing magic about this. It's just on an intraday basis with the volume component. So the stock's up here, great. And then let's zoom out here. This is a 15-minute chart. You can see the same thing. So the high was at 2 o'clock today, 459.99. We'll call it 460. So this was at a really, really nice key indication, because on, again, the 30-minute chart, you can really see how this got above the volume weighted average price and then it started kind of falling down to earth. And then again, on the hourly chart, this is even more clear. So this to me is a failed breakout, even though you could look at this on the daily chart and say, well, wow, you know, let's say it closes here. This is the highest close since like here. So this is a nice move higher. The problem is the closing location. Back here, the stock closed right at the high. Like you could, it opened down here a little bit on the up and down move, but not that. I'm not going to quibble. So it opened low and it closed very, very high. So now we're back to this level. It opened low. It ran up to this level, 460, and is now closing probably about in the top quarter of the range, maybe the top third of the range. So it's not the same quality as this one over here. So I look at this again for today, I kind of see it as a failed breakout. Now, with that said, I'm not saying that the stock's not going higher. I think it is. I think it will go higher. What I'm saying is right now at the current time, this is still just kind of building. I'll just get rid of all this stuff. Well, some of it anyway. This is still just building this base right here. As long as it's in this range, then I'm stating the obvious, then it's not going anywhere. Duh. But as soon as the stock can run up here, it's less than 5% higher and then break out. Now you've got room for another, like for a big move higher. So for right now, this is just still in jail. That's the way I look at it. So anyway, if you are not a member of Stock Market Mentor, check it out. We had a great training session today. A lot of awesome trades that we covered, a lot of stock requests from our members for coverage, see what works, what doesn't, stuff like that. So if you haven't been a member, definitely check it out. If you have been a member and you want to come back, just email Karen at stockmarketmentor.com and tell her that Dan told you to come back. All right, that's all I got for you. I will see you all next time.